Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sanjeev Mota from B&K Securities. On behalf of B&K, I welcome you all to another session of this Fireside Chat that we are having with all these exciting managements. We have with us Mr. Rohitash Gupta. He's the CFO of eClerx Services. Welcome, Rohitash, to this Fireside Chat, and thanks
Thank you,
a lot for
Sanjeev.
giving us time. Yeah. So, what we'll do, Rohitash, we also have our head of IT sector, Devashish Majumdar, online. So what we'll do is I'll first spend maybe first part of the session asking you more about organizational and macro level questions, and then Devashish has some other questions. And if any participants have any questions, they will put it in the Q&A box, and we'll make sure we'll ask them. So that's kind of how we'll do it.
Sure.
So let me start. So we were just talking to a mid-sized IT company yesterday, and what they said that one of the things that has changed over last few years is clients have started asking for solutions rather than a service, right? So they want a business solution rather than some IT service that is coming. So if you look at it from your perspective, you are only in one part of that service. So the BPM or KPO kind of the value chain. So how are you finding these conversations, and how are you able to get new deals in this new framework?
I think that's a very pertinent point, and that's an observation that everybody, including eClerx, is having, that clients expect solutions and outcomes, actually.
Right.
And we are seeing that getting reflected in new conversations that we are pitching proactively, as well as in the older business that we are conducting based on clients' feedback, similar feedback. We are also trying to convert it to what we call as managed service, which is more attuned to showcasing the outcomes as opposed to the number of transactions you process or number of FTs that you deploy. So the move is going away from those input parameters, which are FTs and transactions and so on and so forth, to outcomes. One very simple example, which is a very popular service and pretty niche service from our perspective, is avoidable truck roll, which we provide to large cable companies in US and UK and Canada. And the measurement here is how many truck rolls we are able to cancel. So when an end subscriber of that cable broadband company, faces technical issues, and those technical issues cannot be resolved on phone by the call center guys, then a technician visit is scheduled to the home, and then we come into picture and we run our analytics, find out which of those technician visits have higher propensity to get cancelled by a second attempt. And then our guys make that second attempt and cancel it. So we take the risk, actually, because if our propensity detection model is not accurate, we will be ending up calling each and every customer. And then basically we will be making massive losses on this service because client pays per cancel and not per call.
Right. So, but the question was, are you finding then getting business more challenging? How are you then able to kind of deal with the clients? Then say that, what, I will come in only one part of, why I'm just trying to understand the right to win. Today, why should someone not go to a full service guy like an Infosys or even a smaller who's giving full service? Why should they give part of that service to you?
I think there is a little bit of propaganda here about the full service and a lot of myth, I would say.
Sure.
Simply because you look at any of the fancier cloud solutions or popular software companies, even they don't have full suite, right? I'm talking about multi-billion corporations here.
Right.
So, this is kind of myth that you should have a single source for every single problem.
Right.
The BPM landscape is, theoretical landscape is 10 times bigger than IT. So basically seeing that landscape from narrow IT lens which
Right.
fortunately or unfortunately happens to be bigger industry than BPM. I have, no qualms there. Will be misleading.
Sure. Fair point. And I think that's a good point. Fair. So, actually, just trying to understand, given, as you just said, people are asking for more solution and so on. But actually, going back to the culture of the organization and how that is changing and what kind of thing. So, maybe I'll just ask a very, very basic question to start with. So,
Yeah.
the founders or the principal shareholders have been there the same pretty much from day one. How are they kind of dividing their work, so to say, between themselves? And then I'll ask about the culture part of it. But how is the organization kind of structured?
Yeah, so PD and Anjan, who are our promoters and primary shareholders, they
Yeah.
collectively own about 52% of company.
Yeah.
And since day one of the company, they have been working hand in hand, and in that sense, it has not changed. However, with changes as well as challenges during last 10 years,
Yeah.
obviously there has been some bit of realignment, minor realignment.
Hmm.
So basically, there is slightly more division of responsibility. So it's both horizontal and vertical. On horizontal matters, basically they decide collectively, and horizontal matters, as you can imagine, for an organization, are
Hmm.
probably 80-90% of all the issues or matters
Hmm.
put together. And on
Yeah.
the remaining 10-20%, there is a demarcation. So, for example, any matters which are pertaining to non-India,
Hmm.
one of the persons takes more leads. Any
Right.
of the person which is more India centric, the other person. So these are kind of vertical matters. I'm not getting into
Yeah.
specifics,
Sure.
but
Sure.
largely for 80-90%, it's a joint decision always. I have not seen a thing change there for last 20 years.
Right. Yeah. Fair point. And so let's just understand a bit of culture. In fact, I was trying to do some search and find out about the culture. And there are a couple of videos. Both of them have done one each that I came across about what kind of culture of the organization, what kind of employee. But what is that thread that kind of you think? Because I guess even putting it in a context that one of the big themes that you guys have had is a low cost was actually, which you were much lower cost than most other players so far. So, like, I'm just trying to understand, putting it all together in terms of, is there a theme, is there a culture? How does it look, even from financial parameters? Just trying to kind of elaborate on that, if you could.
So our four pillars of values are called EPIC: excellence, performance, client centric, and integrity. And sorry, people. P is for people. And basically, if I have to pick one as opposed to four, I would say client centricity has been way more weighing in all our minds, including our employees.
Hmm.
Uh, since day one. So basically, when you go through an organizational journey from zero to some size, let's say 1,000 crore, 2,000 crore, 10,000 crore, that may be. Basically, there comes a point when you have to decide whether your values or your culture will supersede the client, the anchor client's culture that you were hitched so along, right? So long. And I think we have done much better justice than larger organizations. And there are pros and cons to both approaches. So basically, our people is still, while they are working in eClerx umbrella, they still very closely and deeply align themselves with clients' values and clients' culture for which they are working for.
Hmm.
And that gives them an edge and also mental satisfaction because, uh, I mean, there is no shame in saying that eClerx is much smaller than a Fortune 50 client that we work for, right? So I think there is a fine balance. While we have organization policies and culture and values and way of working, I think we let our people align themselves much more closely to respective clients' business and culture, and that provides them extra zing for getting into the business context of the client.
Right. Good. No, so just understanding a bit on the financial side. So, you've been low cost, you've had a very good balance sheet management in terms of working capital and so on. How are those things changing, in this environment, especially when you keep hearing of wage hikes, a lot of attrition going on in the industry overall? Maybe your case may be slightly different, I'm saying. But what are you seeing? Plus, to get new clients and all that, do you have to compromise on the balance sheet side that you'll have been, very sacrosanct so far about?
So this business, Sanjeev, remains, as you know, much better than I do, remains cash flow business, right? So there is no the any amount of investment that you put will be much less than the cash you generate in that particular year. So, so I don't think there is any sacrifice needed because ultimately it's people's business. So if you want to grow more, chances are, apart from defining your products and services much better, you have to hire some people, right, for selling those services or taking those solutions to the client or prospects. Similarly, on the domain side, you have to hire experts who are particularly, knowing about tools like analytics or whatever those tools may be and technologies may be. So it's ultimately people business, and within a definite period of time, you expect to monetize those people, whether they are doing selling because they will bring revenue, or whether they are domain experts because they will support additional revenue, right? So I think it's a catch-up game, but ultimately it remains a cash flow business. You don't have to spend too much, like you don't have to set up a factory to get new business, right? Lease facilities will come, and nowadays, as you know, they are available on the tap given the situation that we are on. So I think it's relatively easy for us to keep doing what we have been doing. The core being that you have to remain close to your current large customers because we have very high concentration. So as long as you have those kind of 5-10 anchor clients, and then you can keep your engine running for getting new business and getting into new service areas.
Right. Sure. I'll come to the concentration part. That was one of the questions I had. But before that, you've been successful in doing 3 proper integrations, which is reasonable size relative to what your size was. How have you managed to do that in terms of, again, without kind of dislocating the culture of the organization, anything like that? How, what has been the mantra there?
So Sanjeev, it is easier said than done because uh, majority of the companies who are so-called professionally run, they have different incentives and cycles and motives to do the acquisitions, right? A typical CEO's tenure in any large IT company, if it is so-called professionally run, won't be more than 5 years. You name it, right? Take any large caps. So they have very short horizon when they look at their tenure in that company, and within that they have to make enough bang, right? And that's why you end up compromising on what you acquire. Whereas we, having a different kind of setup compared to most of the other mid-cap IT companies, we don't have that pressure, right? So we are very relatively choosier for what we acquire. And one line mantra for that is, I'm talking financially, I will come to cultural integration part later, is that you create value at the time of acquisition and not by synergies post-acquisition.
Right.
This is easier said than done. As I told you, because of the different setup in other companies, it can't be done. So that's one. Coming to integration and not losing the culture of those companies, I think we are very flexible there. That's the only sauce. I won't call it even a secret sauce. So basically, in one of the acquisitions, the very first acquisition, we kind of dissolved that company and moved the people lock, stock, and barrel into our fold very quickly. In another case, because there were very dissimilarities in the basic fabric of that acquired company, we let it run independently and integrated only on the business and sales side. Right. So I think there are different models available for different acquisition themes, and where you can cause least disruption, you choose that path.
Sure. Well, I think that's great to hear. So, in terms of you said that this is a cash flow business, but one of the ways you end up using cash flow is acquisitions. And what is, or either you could do cash flow, or obviously you can issue stock also. But I guess since you are generating cash, probably cash flow is a better way. So what is there a kind of thought process in terms of growth? Like what kind of acquisitions will you get? Bigger and bigger acquisitions now? What are you thinking from a longer term? I'm not saying just getting a overall thought.
So acquisition will be continuous theme, but as I said, we have harsher criteria for or choices to be made while acquiring. So you will see far fewer than what you may see in some other companies. But acquisitions we will keep looking for, and we will keep doing in future horizon. Uh, and if you look at one of the themes, whenever we have acquired, typically the acquisition size has been about 10% of our revenue, give or take
Right.
10 to 15%. And I think that's the kind of sweet spot. Not to say that you can go with that mindset and acquire, because you will never get otherwise. But that has been the sweet spot, and we will continue to look in for those, as well as much smaller tuck-ins, which also we have done 2 or 3 in the past 10 years.
Right. And the way what you look for in the target would be capabilities, opening up new clients, or how like what are you really looking at?
So that's kind of another difference, I would say, with the typical narrative that we see in other companies, is that you don't run after a particular gap, because when you are small, the size that we are at, gaps are always much more than what you are doing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it will be foolish to say that we do everything, even in a small area,
Right.
right? It's just not possible. So, we don't look for gaps. We
Hmm.
look for what makes sense. And I know it's very generic, because what makes sense, so basically, we look for things that we can run with if
Hmm.
the promoters were to not be there after 1 year, 2 years. So
Right.
that is what I mean by what makes sense. Now,
Hmm.
below that, obviously, when you dig deeper below that statement, that means that services can't be too different.
Hmm.
And by difference, I mean not necessarily what that company is doing and what we are doing currently, but more from client-centric point of view, right? Is the buyer same, for example? Are they also talking to VP of marketing in Fortune 500, and we are also doing something else?
Hmm.
From client lens, you have to look at whether there are similarities. Similarly on the
Right.
people side, similarly on the other facets. And then basically your horizon is very wide, because if you narrow it down and then apply your financial criteria, then you will not get anything ever.
Right. Hmm. Fair point. So if I were to, go back to the business model and look at some of the key factors that you all will monitor and you as a CFO would monitor, let's say in next 5 years, and say that, these are the key things that you are monitoring. Of course, business is one side of the story, which is also driven by what macro situation happens. But what would you as a company be monitoring? What are the key parameters?
Yeah, so basically those important parameters we disclose to investors as well. And just to pick few of them which are relevant from my point of view and top management's point of view are: number one, how fast we can grow our non-top 10 client base.
Right.
That's number one. And once you dig deeper below each, then there are action items that are monitorables, like how is your sales team organized for pitching to those non-top 10, and blah blah blah. So that's one. Second is, are you selling more of managed services or not? And if
Right.
not, can you convert more and more pitches to
Hmm.
managed services? Which is to
Right.
your first point about solution, selling against a solution, or selling a solution. The third is, how we are embedding technology into our solutions right upfront, uh,
Hmm.
both for businesses that we have been running to make it more efficient and thereby sticky, so that you can keep competition away. And secondly, for winning new business, because selling just FTEs may not be resonating with all the buyers out there. And fourth and probably last is that uh, how consciously we can run our business, and this goes to the sustainability theme and goes to the I pillar of our four values that I talked about, integrity.
Yeah.
And this is about running the operations lean, working towards the benefit of 13,000 employees that we have today, and taking care of their extended families if need arises, and things like that. So and increasing basically diversity across the organizations, whether it's nationality, race, gender, whatever you take. So those are the 3 or 4 things that are important for the business in long run.
Sure. Thanks. So, to couple of questions kind of related. You've gone through, as you alluded to yourself, a period which was quite stagnating. A period of stagnation. Recently, last few quarters, your body language seems to have become much more positive. So, what has changed? How have you changed what you've changed? What has gone through? What have you learned from that stagnation, and what is changing? So both macro side and what internally you guys are doing, which is different.
So I think it's very easy to take credit of what's happening, and I will hesitate in doing that. So there are a lot of external factors that have worked in favor in last 18 months, uh, so that the business has become growing business as opposed to stagnating business that it was in last few years. And in addition to that, second part of your question is more important as to maybe the things have happened by and large because of environment, but what you can learn from it so that you can sustain it, right? So that's
Right.
our duty. You can't let it for external environment. So I think what we have learned is that if if we are close enough to the clients in terms of understanding their business problems and offering solutions proactively, and embedding technology so that we pass them demonstrable savings, even on their cost, because ultimately they are spending some dollars on us, right? No matter what value they are getting. So you have to look at both the value part as well as the cost part, and try to keep improving it, no matter what cycle you are in. And that's what we have invested in terms of robotics, process automation technology, or artificial intelligence embedment into various solutions. And I think we are in a good place. And as long as there are no external corporate action type events on our large clients, I think we are in a good momentum, and we can learn from it here. The last part is that somehow there is still a lot of work to be done in defining our services more coherently. Uh, uh, because it's easy for one person to say that client needs this, but when you are expanding your sales force, that salesperson has to easily understand and be able to communicate how we are different, how the solution is different than what others may be offering, and how exactly it will solve your client's problem, and what dollar outcomes it will provide. So I think that piece has been work in progress. I can only say that we are better at it, but I think we still need to do a lot more work on that.
Sure. So, but anything you think that you made a strategic mistake over last few years, which you've kind of corrected now, and you think that's kind of changed? Is there anything like that as well, or?
Yeah. So one element is flexibility. And flexibility not in terms of service delivery that we have been known for. Actually, our clients like us, our people, for flexibility, because as I told you, we have the culture is very client centric. So even if clients ask 5 more things in addition to what is mentioned in a statement of work, our people do it, right? And not badger them for extra money or something like that. So I'm not talking about that flexibility. I'm talking about structural and contractual flexibility in terms of, for example, offering them different pricing models under different pretexts, so that we can be, we can be in line with their expectations of the cost.
Right.
And there are diversity of clients, right? So some are not minding our usual price points. Some may be minding our usual price points, right? Because they can find cheaper alternatives elsewhere. So I think now we are a little more flexible in terms of having everything for everyone. And that will allow us to wade through some challenging situations that we have had in past much better now. I'm not guaranteeing that it will work or not, but
Sure.
ultimately, when clients are making decision for insourcing, like they have made in the past, there is a math working behind the scenes, right? And now I think we are little more flexible, or significantly more flexible, to handle that mathematics that clients are doing while making such large decisions.
Sure. So just last couple of questions from me, and then I'll hand it to Devashish. Any, with wage pressure that we are seeing across IT industry, what do you think that at least for next 1 or 2 years, the costs will actually grow faster than the revenue, or how are you managing that?
So I'm answering on behalf of probably all BPM companies, including eClerx. And see, the BPM is a very different pyramid game than what you see in IT.
Hmm.
So we still rely on a lot more freshers uh,
Right.
than, and by fresher, I don't mean necessarily, the person who just passes out of college. No, fresher
Sure.
meaning is little different. Fresher could be, for example, in our case, somebody who is moving away from a hotel front desk to a
Right.
call center job supporting travel clients abroad, right? So
Right.
I'm talking in that sense, fresher. And there is, lot more availability at that kind of fresher pool, like I defined. People want to move from manufacturing jobs. I mean, good or bad for economy, I
Sure.
don't know, but there is a lot of availability at the bottom of the pyramid, and our
Right.
bottom of the pyramid in that sense is much more wide, right?
Right.
So only 15 to 20% people at the top of the pyramid are which are required to have deep domain expertise in whatever area you are working for. So
Sure.
whether it's KYC, then obviously you need KYC expert. If it's some digital tool, then it's that expert, etc. So the challenge that you are talking about, yes, it is there in the top 15%. Will there be consequences of that in terms of financials? Of course. Whether you increase the price of 15%, it will hurt, right? But you have to see it in the context of the entire thing, that it may not be a meaningful impact in that sense till the time you have a wider supply of 85% of your pyramid, because you can keep your cost manageable there.
Sure. That's great to hear. So the last question, do you have any 5-year kind of goals, stated goals, or just a kind of direction? How would eClerx look like 5 years down the line?
So we have done that exercise in 2016,
Right.
and not blaming it on that exercise, but since then we have been stagnated, right, for last 4 years, barring last 1 year. So I think this kind of exercises are valuable uh, uh, when you are on a roll, right? And because once you set a target and progress is not there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, then that kind of statements lose meaning internally, because people are also watching that management set this goal and how we are progressing against that. So I think we will be more cautious in putting that target. I'm not talking about externally, I'm saying even internally.
Right.
Because first you have to be responsible for the employees that work with you, as to what goals you set for them for next 5 years. All we can say is that we want to make less of mistakes that we have made in last 10 years, and thereby grow faster than what we have grown in last 5 years.
Right. That's great, sir. Thank you. I'll hand it to Devashish. Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Thank Rohitash for taking us in so detail in so many things. So I have a few questions which is related to sector and the company. So let me start with getting some understanding about how is the macro scenario today. Because if we see eClerx, we all know that what has happened in the last 4 years, the stagnation that we already spoke about. And it's not only eClerx, most of the BPM companies were stagnated for last 2 to 3 years, and which has kind of changed in last 2 3 quarters. So, do you think that this is a pent-up demand that has come in? It will not last more than 2 3 quarters, or it's a structural change which is there to stay for next 2 to 3 years?
So Devashish, that's a good question, and answers may vary between IT and BPU.
Yes.
Okay, so I am responding on behalf of BPM. I think large portion of what you are seeing now for BPO industry is a structural shift, a positive structural shift.
Okay.
So a good example of that, I will just give you two examples.
Yeah.
The first one is that call center, which is still the largest piece of BPM industry. Obviously, it is now called customer experience as opposed to call center, but okay. So customer experience, which is roughly 45% of our industry even today, and it includes both voice and non-voice, right? So you have chat and everything else. There is a structural positive shift because the volumes have increased dramatically in the pandemic. Now, if the pandemic were to be over tomorrow or after 3 months, 6 months, do you think that volumes are going to go down? No, not all of it. Some of it may, but not all of it. So in that sense, I am saying it's a structural shift because more volumes means more work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one. Second is that through this pandemic, industry is also trying to learn. It's a work in progress kind of theme to evolve newer models to get supply from tier 2, tier 3 cities more, to tap people who were not able to work before because they can't come to office. It could be disabled people, or it could be work from home, work at home kind of housewives or people, and it could be people who were not young enough, but they can still be employed because now the culture is more digital, right? So when you're working, it's not a physical field where you are working a 40-year-old working with 20 years some things. It feels odd, right? But that kind of oddity is going away. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to increase the employability of people, and how it will benefit the industry and ultimately our clients is that same flexibility that I was talking about.
Yes.
So not everybody is outsourcing today.
Right.
Even today, right? There may be various inhibitions why they are not outsourcing. I am not saying this kind of things will solve all those inhibitions, but at least one of the inhibitions, to the extent it was, supply or the cost price point, that may get partly addressed by when these models mature of work from home and tapping newer base for our industry workforce. So I think the second part, I would still hesitate in saying that it is a structural shift yet. A lot of work has to be done, but the first one looks like to be a kind of semi-permanent change.
Great to hear that. And second part of the question, we have discussed this in the past, but because of all the audience that are present here. So if I see eClerx kind of a BPM KPO company whose structure is little different. Most of your competition is kind of 50-50 effort mix on-site offshore, whereas eClerx is absolutely fully offshore model. So what exactly internally the system and processes that you have developed that you are able to charge the same billing rate that let's say Genpact is charging, but able to provide the service at 1/3 of the cost, and that is making a so much higher margin for you. So what exactly is that? I mean that specific about eClerx that we have.
So we started our onshore build out only 5-6 years back.
Right.
Before that, we were almost purely offshore company, right? Today, we are at about 22% revenue being onshore.
Right.
And part of it has, or significant part of it has come through CLX acquisition actually.
Right.
And remaining, we have built out organically by setting up North Carolina, contact center, and also building out our digital and financial market consulting capability in US and UK. Now coming to your question of margin differences and revenue per FT, etc. I think you have to understand the starting point, and no two companies' starting points will be same.
Right.
And the answer lies there. So our starting point, eClerx starting point in 2001 was what we now know as digital, right? So, and that I'm trying to answer a second question also, which you have yet not asked, which is, so basically when we started working in so-called e-commerce space, or now called digital, in 2001. Soon after that, we entered into capital markets, in 2004, and started working there when capital markets BPO was non-existent, right? So we picked areas that were very, very nascent and niche back then, definitely in the sense of outsourcing and offshoring.
Right. Right.
So those were our starting points. Whereas most of the other larger companies, and that's one of the reasons why they are much larger also, by the way, their starting point was in the wave 1 and wave 2 of BPO outsourcing, which was call center, transcription, blah, 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 blah. We didn't start there at all. And this helped them scale pretty fast, because even now we are talking, right, that this is a structural shift and volumes have only increased. So they captured that space in wave 1, wave 2 in 1990s probably. And even now they would be growing in those spaces because of the structural shift. However, because they have been present in those larger spaces, which 10 other call centers provide same service, the margins get squeezed. Right?
Yes.
And in process of growing and catering to their large client need, they ended up acquiring large onshore companies and integrating them. And that's how their onshore share become suddenly, abruptly, very, very high. In most cases, especially in the healthcare space, some companies acquired very large bets in US and so on and so forth. Also, some people, onboarded some clients captive onshore in UK, etc. And that's how they became larger. So I think we never got into, our starting point was different, and we ended up not taking very big bets onshore. And those are the two reasons why margin is different.
Okay, understood. So one related question here, and Sanjeev has also touched that point. So if I see today, when we are talking, we have one IT service company acquired a large size BPO company almost at 3 times revenue, right? Now, obviously, those bigger guys are creating capabilities around BPM and KPO services. So, clients have also moved into a direction of giving an integrated deal to a large size players. So, how our conversation with the client has changed? Is it like that for some specific capabilities that we are having, or the flexibility that I've already spoken about, or the cost benefit that we can provide? They may go a certain part to IT services, but the BPM KPO business for the existing kind of client and for the new client will come to us. So what exactly is that secret sauce?
I think partly we addressed this question when Sanjeev was asking about integrate, similar kind of question. And this is partly myth, and I will tell you why. So basically, if you look at any company, including your own company for that matter,
Yeah.
And you can apply the same logic to a Fortune 500 or 1000 company. So there will be a CEO, there will be a CTO, there will be a CFO, there will be business heads, right? In any organization, especially of that size, is there a possibility that a business owner of XYZ division or a CMO will not have any power to make their own decision? Just think about it. Is it ever possible? Doesn't
No.
look possible to me, at least now.
Correct.
Because if it was true, then that person itself will not be there. Their job will be done by CTO or CEO, right?
Right.
So it's like a catch-22. So till the time those roles are there, they will have discretion to solve
Right.
their own problems and achieve their own targets that they have agreed with the top management.
Right.
We play in that space, that we are either serving CMO or CEO in most cases, wide variety of cases.
Okay.
And these people have power to make best decision. Now, if an integrated IT company can solve a CEO's problem better than us, obviously they will be hired. I'm not saying that they will not be hired, but saying that because I am also making a software for you, hence I do it better, I don't think that logic works.
Understood. Understood. We have already discussed the outlook about BPM sector. Now, if I see eClerx today, we are very nichely concentrated in 3, 4 industries where we have a very good stronghold with the clients. So if you can help me with how these sectors are looking like to you today, where BFSI looking far better, maybe retail is coming back. So if you can give me some direction that which are the sectors looking in, I mean next 2 to 3 years perspective, the structural shift that we've already spoken about, where those those industries are fitting in the overall scheme of things.
So BFSI or capital markets, we are seeing very good traction at this time. But we have to keep that in perspective that for last 12 to 15 months, it was very flattish.
Absolutely.
So I think they are cycles because we are not talking about those industries. We are talking about those specific clients outsourcing more work to eClerx, right? Because those two can be different things at times. So, but I mean, that's a fact that we are seeing slightly better traction in BFSI as of now. Digital is a long-term bet because, I think everybody understands that world will be much more digital 5-10 years hence. There might be ups and downs based on a specific client situation or, your own capabilities, etc. But keeping that aside, there is it's almost like an equity market, right? Barring few blips, it is likely to, grow in future.
Yeah.
Third one is customer operations, which I have kind of already touched upon, that there is a slightly structural shift which has happened. And to the extent it becomes permanent, I think we are in a very good space because we sit over call centers or in last 3 years, actually, we have started doing primary contact center work also in certain cases.
Okay.
So I think both those, so contact center looks good because of that shift. BFSI currently is looking good, but there have been phases, and digital long term looks pretty good.
Understood. Now, one related question is we have already touched upon the managed services and the platform and solution portion of it. So, how in this structural shift scenario, when we have already developed some solutions which is accepted to the client's mind, do these solutions give us a certain level of pricing power or stickiness with the customer of ours? And once they move to our RPA, it is difficult for them to move to somebody else. So that gives us a certain level of stickiness or the pricing power, which ultimately percolates into better margin.
Yeah. So I think we have realized one more thing for stickiness apart from automation. And both have to be together. And we have seen that working in multiple deals, especially the ones that we have participated in last 1 year. And that learning has come through Personive business model.
Okay.
So Personive doesn't have any of its own IP.
Right.
No RPA, nothing. right? So it was a pure classical offshore BPM business, right?
Yeah.
And while we were trying to understand their business during the acquisition process, it kept us amazing. It kept amazing us as to, because we talk about all these things, right? Automation, this. How come their clients are sticky and growing with them? Those clients are definitely knowing there's a RPA out there, right? It's not how they are keeping them intact and actually growing them. And the answer for that was that you can achieve certain cost benefits from automation, no doubt about it. You can improve the process also through automation, no doubt about it. But there is something more than that that is required, because ultimately client is looking for price per outcome. So if your operation is very lean, then you can keep your price anyway down much below what automation can achieve at that point of time. Not to say it will remain static. You have to keep improving, right?
Okay.
So I think there are multiple levers to achieve the same objective, because ultimately client is looking for output and outcomes at a certain price point that they are willing to pay. You can achieve it through automation, and till the time you are delivering that, there will be stickiness. So platforms bring stickiness, I think, is a important thing, but it's not a necessary condition.
Understood. Now, and thanks for answering that in a very clarified manner. One question I have around the problems that eClerx faced and the way we are out today. So one of the reason of our top 10 clients not doing well with us, there are some roll-offs that we have seen, which has changed significantly in last 2-3 quarters. So that is one part. Other part is we have seen the non-top 10 clients, especially the emerging clients that we call it, that has grown significantly with us. So, is there any pattern change in the top 10 clients and the emerging clients today, or it's like the same clients we are penetrating? I mean, same industry, but we are penetrating them more. So, how do you look at it, and what is the definition of this emerging clients category that we talk about?
So, Devashish, I think your last question will answer the other questions. So, emerging is a moving pool. Basically, it's a non-top 10 pool.
Right.
So your top 10 also, the underlying names may be changing over a period of time, because the 2 or 3 clients that we lost in 2017, 2018, they would have been in top 10 then, but not anymore. Somebody else has come in, right? So both the list, whether it's top 10 or whether it's emerging, both are dynamic. Having said that, top 10 is much more static, relatively speaking, than emerging, right? For both the reasons, because clients can go away in emerging pool much easier than the top 10 will. And in non-top 10 or emerging clients, you can keep adding new logos also, some of which will end up growing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that answers your question as to why emerging keeps growing, because of the construct itself. Having said that, we have chosen 15, 20 names within those emerging, where we invest more in terms of having relationship manager who is dedicated, domain experts who look for newer opportunities within the same space, etc. So that's the part of growing few selected names within emerging. But emerging as a pool is very dynamic.
Yeah. And about the top 10 clients, that the problems that we have faced. So if you can give us some kind of case study, not taking the name, that what was the problem and what has solved and how that client has come back for us. Any case study for that?
Sorry, you mean top 10 clients?
Any client case study where let's say it's part of your top 10 client who has gone into some trouble because of maybe their own problem, because of problem with us, whatever, and then it has kind of came back for us, and these are the specific reason. Maybe we developed the RPA which got far more acceptance, or the industry itself has started coming back. So if you can explain the overall this story with some case study that will help us all to understand what was the process that has gone through.
So I don't think any particular large story comes to my mind what you're asking, but one of the 3 businesses that we lost in those 5 years, because our client got acquired by somebody else who was
Okay.
anti-outsourcing, and
Okay.
actually it onshored the work in-house.
Okay.
And now we are back in them in a small way, not in a big way, in a small way through a different service that we were not offering them at that point. So we
Okay.
were providing them avoidable truck rolls at our
Okay.
peak. After that, we
Okay.
lost them. And
Okay.
now we have entered them using our dispatch service through a
Okay.
very convoluted route, because we are uh, we are supporting their dispatch organization,
Okay.
which works with multiple dispatch vendors, outsourced vendors who provide technicians, right? Who go
Okay.
to end customers' home. So we
Okay.
have started supporting almost the entire US ecosystem of those such small dispatch vendors, some of which are working for that cable client, right?
Okay.
So through that route, we have now back into that client in a small way.
Understood. Understood. And one question here, and when we are talking about transformation of clients and eClerx and as an industry altogether, BPM is historically known for a cost efficiency. Okay, but today we are moving into a world of digital where everything is happening around technology. So, do you think BPM as a sector is moving from cost savings to a growth driver, or the driver of growth for the business? Because then your the structural shift or whatever you call about it, will the game will change altogether. Is it happening around you?
It is happening, and customer experience is a great example of that.
Right.
So that is, people very often call it a low-end service because, there is a call center involved, blah, blah, blah. Some bit of it may be true, but think about it, that's the frontline service. You
Absolutely.
can't go more front end than that. You are talking to your client's client,
Yeah.
right? So it is a very, very front end service. And in today's digital world, because you are connecting with those clients only remotely all the
Right.
time,
Right.
that kind of experience is delivered by a distributed workforce, whether it's in-house or outsourced to eClerx or Genpact or whosoever. They are your face who are interacting with your very valued customers,
Right.
and that interaction will define whether those customers will buy more of the products or not, and thereby determine the business outcomes at large for that client.
Right.
And BPM industry is supporting that, right? 40,
Correct.
45% is kind of that interaction alone.
Correct.
The back office part of it is also there, but there is no end customer element, right? You are supporting shared services, payroll or supply
Yeah.
chain or whatever. That's not
Yeah.
very critical in that sense. And then comes the analytics and automation part of it, which
Yeah.
obviously is critical because that can provide exponential outcomes to some of your clients, right?
Yeah.
So I think the CX and analytics piece, which are very core integral part of BPM now, have been so, uh, are the growth drivers for our clients' business and thereby for the industry.
Great, great, great. Two last questions from my side. One is obviously around hiring. You have touched that with discussion with Sanjeev. So we have seen, if we remove even percent of acquisition manpower that we have added, last quarter specifically, the hiring was extremely strong. And if I just do some maths, we'll be losing around 3,000 per 500 people because of the attrition. But we have already added 1,000 people in Q1, and the number that I recollect you spoke about would be like similar kind of run rate for next 2 to 3 years. Sorry, 2 to 3 quarters. So obviously there is an attrition challenge that I understood, but there is absolutely a clear growth visibility which may not be there 3 quarters back, right? So, and which is corroborated with the thought when you said that there is a structural shift that is happening. So, can I get some sense that the, let's say this 3,400 3,000 4,000 people that you will be hiring, how much is that for attrition management and how much is that for change of the growth and phase of growth? And the second is the manpower that you are hiring. Is there any change in, change in structure of that hiring, that we are today hiring more experienced people, or digital enabled guys who can immediately start working for me, which was not the case in the past? So how is that changing?
So the skill mix remains pretty similar. I already explained to you the 85-15% phenomena. The 15% will be in that league that you are talking about, tied to a specific technology or a skill. Remaining 85% will be generic people.
Yeah.
Obviously with some minor experience, but not necessarily somebody who can be called expert. Coming to your, net headcount growth question, it's a mix of that. I won't be very specific, but it's both for improving bench to tackle future challenges. Maybe wave 3 is coming, maybe not. Maybe we need to beef up bench because now fatigue is setting in, and there will be some kind of return to office challenges that companies will face. So we needed to beef up bench. So that's one. And second, we have already spoken about that, both customer operations and BFSI are seeing positive tailwinds. Digital long-term tailwind was always there, right?
Right.
So it's kind of there always. So at this point of time, obviously we are looking for growth.
Right.
So some bit of that headcount is for growth for sure.
Understood. Last question on margins. We know eClerx for margins. In the previous cycle, we have seen the 32-33% kind of margin reported by eClerx. Currently, we are at 26-27%. Do you think that a current structure, do you think we can go back into that previous margin levels, what we used to do in the previous cycle?
I don't know what you mean by previous cycle, but before 2016, obviously there was a different dynamic because we had those 3 large offshore businesses which were most profitable because they were most mature clients.
Yeah.
That thing I don't think is coming back, right?
Okay.
What instead we have done is we have added this 22% onshore business, which is relatively consciously low margin business.
Yeah.
So I think you see 2 things, right? One, that profitable business which was there 2015 is not going to come back anytime soon.
Right.
At least not at that profit level. And second, onshore has been added. So I think short answer is it will be unfair to expect going back to 2015 margins.
Great. So Sanjeev, I'm done with my questions. Do you have any client question, please?
Actually, most of the client questions are also answered. We have one hand raised. Bharat Bhai, if you have any question, you raise your hand. I guess that's fine then. So I guess no more questions. And if we have any follow-up, we'll come back to you.
Sure.
Yeah. Great. And thank you so much for doing this with us. I think spending your valuable time and wish you all the very best. And I'm sure we'll be, talking to you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Thanks to all the audience for being here.
Take care.